Have been counted, and question 3, the referendum to force the sale of Maine's 2 large electric utility companies, was soundly defeated. That means your mailboxes and TVs won't be overwhelmed any longer by vote no messages. But will the debate over electricity in Maine go away? Not likely. 207's Don Kerrigan is here with a piece of the story that hasn't gotten much attention.
That's
Don?
right, Rob. As you and I know from covering things for a long time, Mainers have been arguing and complaining about electricity, especially the price of it, for a very long time. And this year's referendum, which you could say is about public power, was not the first. It actually happened before in 1973.
Same thing as now. Expensive electrical rates compared to public power areas such as TVA and Washington State, Holton, Maine. So the emphasis was cheaper electricity.
50 years ago, Maine voters decided the first referendum on public power, led by a 32-year-old state senator, Peter Kelly.
Went all over the state in 73. We get the 38,000 signatures, whatever it was, and put it on the ballot. And then there's a heavy fight after that.
The issues were remarkably similar to this year's vote: unhappiness over high electric rates and the control of Maine's utilities. At the time, they were Central Maine Power, Bangor Hydroelectric, and Maine Public Service. That referendum 50 years ago would have created what was called the Power Authority of Maine. It would have been run by a 7-member board appointed by the governor, and would have been responsible for providing the electricity to the Maine grid, either buying it from outside sources such as Canada or generating it here in the state. Back then, unlike now, the private utilities also generated the power from big hydro dams, from oil and even coal-burning power plants, and just starting from the nuclear plant at Maine Yankee.
Maine's utilities were far more powerful then than they are now.
Tony Buxton, now a leading energy lawyer, was the campaign manager for public power.
They had never lost a bill in the Maine legislature. If you were running for high office, you visited them as though you were visiting a shrine. In fairness, they also did a lot for the society.
And he says that perceived power of the utilities helped to fuel the referendum drive.
People stood in line at churches all over Maine on Saturdays and Sundays, waiting in the cold to sign the petitions.
No surprise, Peter Kelly recalls it was a tough campaign.
I thought I was a good capitalist, a good boy from Caribou, Maine, and they were making me out to be a communist. So radical. So of course I wasn't.
The utilities were then all locally owned, and they fought back to protect their business from even a partial government takeover. Supporters argued public power would make electricity cheaper.
And why was it cheaper? It cut out a lot of big costs. No stockholders' fees, no taxes. Financing was bond prices. You couldn't beat it.
I think I was young and idealistic, and I did think it was a good idea. It turns out the piece of legislation was horrendous, which was pointed out in the campaign. Somebody had just taken the New York Power Authority and crossed that name out and put in state of Maine. And the New York Power Authority is free from all regulation by the state of New York, virtually all, and that probably wasn't a good idea.
And then, as now, the Yes campaign did not have much money. You were significantly outspent.
That would be an understatement, yeah.
That public power referendum had both supporters and opponents in the legislature, but it did have the support of the governor, at that time, Democrat Ken Curtis. Governor Curtis may have supported the public power plan, but that did not turn the tide. And you lost, the referendum lost.
We did.
By a fair amount, right?
62-38.
Yeah, so.
Not close.
But that referendum may have started something. Decades of closer scrutiny and argument over Maine's electric utilities. How deep is the public's unhappiness with the utilities?
I think it's pretty deep.
Maine public advocate Bill Harwood wasn't living here at the time, but says the 1973 public power referendum and the one 50 years later underscore that many Mainers are not content with what we have.
That's a lot of people, and something that CMP and Versant, I will encourage them, and I hope they're smart enough to pay very close attention to those, try and figure out what that demographic is, which part of the states they're more populated, what age, what's going on, and see if we can tease out what the concerns are and address them.
For Peter Kelly, public power is still the answer.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, 50 years later. We hope we don't have to wait another 50 years to get another referendum out there.
For Tony Buxton, time has changed his views. And the issue of climate change, he says, means both public and private are needed.
I think there's a role for government funding of some energy facilities because of the climate crisis. We're going to have a hard time putting on the backs of ratepayers, large and small, old and young, poor and wealthy, all the costs that we need to incur to achieve our climate objectives.
50 years later, and Maine is still looking for cheaper power, cleaner power, and maybe a way to end more than a half-century of debate.
A lot has changed over those 50 years. The Maine utilities, the large utilities, no longer generate the power. The state ordered them to sell off all of their generating operations, the hydro dams, the power plants, everything. More than 20 years ago, the Maine Yankee nuclear plant, of course, is gone. But Rob, the unhappiness over power, we still have expensive electricity compared to other parts of the country. Given that and the pressures of climate change, I'd be surprised if we wait another 50 years before there is some new version of this fight.
The debate will go on.
It will.
Thanks, Tom.